This is Lionel's Veranda Turbine from the 2021 Volume 1 catalog. I got a lot to cover, so let's go. I'm real excited about today's video. This is Lionel's new Veranda Turbine with legacy and Bluetooth control. There's a lot of things that I need to cover about this engine, but you know, this engine is new to me. I know that Lionel came out with this in their TMCC version years ago. I guess it's been a while since they've released this engine. But this engine is new to me. I've only been involved in the O-gauge railroading for just under 6 years, so this is all new to me. And man, I love the features on this engine. I love everything about it. It's really just a great engine. To give you guys a little history of this locomotive, UP ordered 15 of them. This is considered the second generation of the GTELs, the gas electric turbine locomotives. The second generation was built in the early 1950s, and I think it was around early 1950s, and they ran until the mid to early 1960s, and they developed about 4,500 horsepower. This engine in particular took place in the UP did a trial where they wanted to be able to run this with other lash this up with other diesel locomotives. So they did some tests on it to see that it was capable of being able to run with other standard diesel locomotives, and all but 6 were capable of doing that. So this engine is a standard legacy locomotive with Bluetooth control. It also has a super bass unit in the tender. So there's sound that comes out of the tender in addition to sound coming from the locomotive. So you really get that stereo sound, almost like a vision line where you get the sound from the tender and the locomotive. This engine has 2 motors. The middle 2 trucks are powered, and the trucks on the end are non-powered. What's really cool about this locomotive is its weight. So they made this engine all in a die-cast shell. Most locomotives most diesel locomotives will come and have a plastic car body, but this thing has got a lot of weight to it because literally it's all metal. The total weight of this engine is almost 17 pounds. The locomotive is about 12 pounds, and the tender is just shy of 5 pounds. So it's just under a total weight of 17 pounds. So this thing has a lot of weight. Even though I did a review on MTH's Proto 3 propane turbine locomotive a couple months ago, and if you guys watch that, I had mentioned that all the wheels on the turbine are powered, and this locomotive, not all the wheels are powered, but this has a lot more weight to it, so that gives it an advantage with pulling power. It comes with 4 traction tires, giving it good pulling power. The total length of this whole set is 33 inches, coupler to coupler. I don't know if you guys are aware, but UP, when they used to run these engines, in the rear of the locomotive, not only is there a turbine to power the electric motors, but there's also a standard diesel that powers the electric motors also, and they would use that diesel when they would shunt this engine around train yards. And because the turbine consumed a lot of that seed bunker fuel oil, and it used a lot of fuel, so to conserve fuel they would just use the diesel to move the engine around the yard at slow speeds. And then when they would operate it on the main line, they would the engineer would turn the turbine on and run it with the turbine running. So one of the cool features of this engine is that when you run this between 0 and 14 speed step on your cab 2 controller, the normal sound of a diesel engine sounds from this sounds just like a standard diesel, and there's 2 smoke units, one in the rear and one in the middle, and smoke comes out of the rear exhaust to simulate the smoke from the diesel. But once this engine hits speed step 15, the sound of the turbine comes on, and the smoke in the middle of the locomotive kicks in. And I just love the sound of the turbine. Such a unique sound. It really kind of gives this engine a really cool sound as it rolls around your layout. I really love the sound of the turbine. I think Lionel did a great job with that. One of my other favorite features is the horn. You can customize the horn. That's a standard feature with Lionel. There's 5 different horn sounds, but the horn that comes straight from the factory, I really like the sound of it. I think it's really cool. That's probably one of my favorite features about this engine. I wanted to give you guys a closer look at the roof of the locomotive. You've got the horns over here. You've got some piping over here. Right here is the exhaust where the smoke comes out when the turbine kicks in on the engine. This is the exhaust I was talking about. When the engine goes over the speed step 15 or higher. Right here is the access to all the switches. So this is really nice. This cover here is all metal, and it's held on by magnets, so it just kind of snaps into place. Real easy to remove. I'll give you guys a closer look at the switches in a minute. I just wanted to show you how to remove the cover. Over here, some more roof detail. It's all molded in. Back here is the smoke for the diesel. This smoke always stays on the whole time the engine is running. So these are the 2 smoke units here where the smoke comes out. Here's a closer look at the switches on the roof of the locomotive. There's quite a few switches here, so I'll go over each one. This is the standard run program switch. This is the on and off signal switch, and this is what sounds the horn and the bell. This is the Bluetooth on and off. This is the dialogue on and off. This is to turn the rear coupler on the locomotive on and off. Now, if you're running this locomotive on one IP address, so both units are on this same IP address, you want to make sure that this is off, so that when you fire the rear coupler, only the coupler on the tender opens, and the coupler on the locomotive stays closed when you try to decouple this from a train. This is your smoke on and off, and then this is your auxiliary smoke, which is this smoke here. So you can turn this smoke on and off individually with this switch here. And so what I'll do is I'll go into more detail with the switches on the tender and how to configure it. You can either do it where you can have it as a lash up where each unit, the engine and the tender, has its own ID, or you can make it so that both units have the same ID. And I'll go into more depth on that in a little bit. Here's a closer look at the tender quickly. There's nice handrails here on the roof with some nice ladder work here. Some nice ladders and walkways. Really nice. And of course this tender is all metal too, so it's got some good weight to it. Looking at the underside of this locomotive, the wheel arrangement is typical of a turbine. It's got the 4 sets of 2-axle trucks. The trucks in the middle are powered. The trucks on the ends, this one and this one, are non-powered. So if you guys watched my MTH propane turbine video from a couple of months ago, I had mentioned that all the wheels on the turbine were powered, which is a nice feature. This engine only has 2 trucks that are powered. And the wheel arrangement is just like the MTH one. You've got 2 sets of trucks that sit on a bar that rotates, and then each truck rotates independently. So it can kind of shift like this. You've got 4 pickup rollers, and here is the speaker for the sound with the Bluetooth symbol. This is the underside of the tender. You've got the 2 3-axle trucks with the 2 pickup rollers and the electrocoupler on the end over here. And this coupler is actually just a standard coupler. So when I first opened up this locomotive, I came across these switches on the rear tender, and I was a little confused as to why the tender had its own switches. And then I realized what Lionel had done is that the locomotive has its own run program switch along with the signal, dialogue, and Bluetooth switches. And what this enables you to do is that you can either, if you look at the manual, you can either, when you add this into your roster, you can put both units on program and assign both units to the same ID number, or you can do it independently. Just a word of caution, what I did was I didn't want to sacrifice using a separate ID number just for the tender, because I realized this tender is never going to run without the engine. So there's no point on giving it its own ID number, because the 2 units will always run together. So what I did was I chose to give both units the same ID number. I both put them on program and added them and gave them the ID number of 61. But just a word of caution, if you do that, I would suggest shutting the dialogue switch here off and enable the dialogue to only come from the lead unit. So you can kind of look at it like this, where if you do a lash up, the legacy system, only the prime mover sounds come from both locomotives, but the dialogue and the horn and the bell only come from the lead unit when you do a lash up. So you gotta kind of treat it like that. But it is nice to have the signal sounds coming from both units. You get that stereo effect, kind of like a Vision Line locomotive, where you have the sound coming out of the tender and the locomotive. So I chose to keep the bell and horn on the tender and on the locomotive, but the dialogue, I chose to keep it off. So, and the reason why is if you select button number 4 on the cab 2 remote, where you get the radio chatter, the legacy system will randomly select a dialogue, and it changes every time. So if you have both dialogues on, you're going to get 2 different conversations going on at the same time, and they're going to kind of cancel each other out. So you really want to have that dialogue switch off if you're having both units under the same ID. So here they are, the run program, the signal switch, that's the bell and the horn. This is the Bluetooth up here, and then this is the dialogue, crew talk dialogue switch on and off. So, like I said before, this locomotive is a die-cast car body, so for that reason, the doors on this engine do not open. But Lionel really did a fantastic job with the handrails, particularly on the sides. That's one of the unique looks on this engine. That's why they call it the Veranda, because it's got the walkways that are kind of inset. But the detail on this engine is just phenomenal. I just love the detail work. It's really, really nice. I'm real excited about this locomotive. Even the tender is nice. You've got the bunch of rails on the roof. Some really nice detail, and of course the graphics are nice and crisp and clear. Okay, now for the best part, the running session.
Dispatcher here. Start her up. Stand by for track orders. Over.
Yes, sir. We'll fire her up. Out.